Hello, my friends. I know that I've been promising you some information, so now I got it. What about H5N1? The layman's way of saying that is the avian influenza. This bug has been going around for a couple of years now, affecting a lot of different animal species. Why are we concerned? Because right now it's starting to affect cats, and that obviously should worry everyone. That's why I got in touch with my good friend Dr. Julie Levy from the University of Florida, a feline health and welfare expert if there ever has been one, to get the skinny on what we know. And this is an emerging situation. So I wanted to know history. I wanted to know symptoms. I wanted to know who's susceptible to this thing. I want to know how to prevent it and what happens if cats get it and what the future looks like. And I wanted it quick and high level, and I think I got it. So sit down. Remember that this is February 2025. This is an emerging thing. What we know now is going to change very quickly, but I'm going to give you some links at the end of this thing to make sure you are as on top of it as you can possibly be for the sake of our cats. Let's listen. Can you give us a quick rundown of avian flu, when it started and where it's at right now?
Yeah, the bird flu, this high pathogen avian influenza, has been circulating for several years internationally, and it's spread by wild birds that are migrating on the flyways. So that's how it spreads across continents. Every year, it recycles again. And as it does, it mutates a little bit and spreads to other species. Primarily, it's been restrained to birds, but in Florida, we have a die off of marine mammals, so it's quite extensive.
Wow.
And recently, just last year, there was an outbreak in the first herd of dairy cows, and that was very new because we have not experienced influenza in cattle before. What was interesting from a cat point of view is one of the first signs there was a problem on that first dairy farm was all the cats died.
Really? So cat was diagnosed before they went, uh-oh, the cows?
Well, they kind of knew there was something wrong with the cows, but their first testing was negative because they didn't look for influenza. But the veterinarian who took care of that farm as a farm call practice noticed the cats and was savvy enough to pick up the cats that had died and get them tested, and then also do more extensive testing on the cattle, which is how they identified that bird flu had spread to dairy cows specifically.
Where was that?
That was in Texas, the first case. And then what was recognized is that the virus in cows is shed in very high amounts in the milk. And typically on a dairy farm, you'd feed the milk to the cats.
Right.
And so that's how they got it.
I mean, do we have any kind of stats at this point about how many domestic cats have already died or have presented?
So over 100 cats have been documented in the past 2 years with this strain of avian influenza. A lot of those are those farm cats. So it would be, 20 cats on the farm and 2/3 of them died or something. It makes you wonder, did that other third get exposed and are immune now? They recovered. They didn't die because they weren't treated. They probably all got milk, the bed. So, but those are the documented ones. There's a really good website that USDA keeps up to date, and it's got every single case in every species.
Oh, wow.
Of
look at that.
Influenza that are diagnosed and confirmed at the national level. That's really important. They've done really good due diligence, and they know exactly what genetic strains they are. And it's got all the wildlife and all the avian species as well as their domestic species.
That's amazing. And we will have a link to that website in the description of the video. One question I've got is, because there has been a lot of talk about cats only in the past couple of weeks, and not only their transmission to each other, going from farm cats to street cats to house cats, but also cat to human, human to cat. One of the things and what are the other animals that we would see this in? Like I saw a whole huge list of animals.
There's dozens of species, literally, that have been infected with bird flu. So we have multiple marine mammals, like the elephant seals that have been wiped out, decimated by that. Seals in the Galapagos that are in danger of being wiped out by this bird flu. All of the weasel family things like ferrets are very susceptible to influenzas. Cats, dogs can get it too, but they're very mildly affected.
That's what I was going to ask you. Having both cats and dogs in my life was, holy crap, what about the dogs? And dogs, for some reason, are less susceptible to this?
Less susceptible, and if they get sick, it's very mild. So they're really not a species that we have to worry about very much. They probably shed very little virus. They're probably not spreading it within the household. They're more the victims. Like if somebody in the household, a person, has bird flu or different influenza, they might spread it to the dog, but it's really one direction for that species. In cats, it's still early and we don't have all the information that we need from the cases that are being investigated right now. But more than likely, there is some cat-to-cat spread. It might not all be a serious illness in all of the cats. Some might be mildly affected or some might be infected but not show any signs at all. And then the transmission between humans and cats with other species of influenza, other experiences, we've seen more like COVID, that it was more likely the person who was infected that spread it to the cat, not vice versa.
And here's the thing, you can't say anything about this without me starting to get sweaty palms, because first of all, I think post-pandemic, we're conditioned now as a society we're on edge still, in just a few years. And I think both you and I are worried because we were worried what's going to happen to the cats. And I think with good reason.
What we're seeing now in most reports from USDA is cats from dairy farms or cats that have been fed raw or freeze-dried poultry-based foods or raw milk. So there's a highest risk for cats that are not out there in the environment where they will encounter either milk on dairy farms or wild birds or encounter sick birds or sick backyard poultry.
How is bird flu passed from cat to cat?
From cat to cat, it is most likely going to be respiratory secretion. So it's shed in high amounts in ocular secretions like tears, in saliva and nasal discharge. That's going to be the most common way.
They're grooming each other.
Grooming each other or sharing a food bowl. Can cross-contaminating that food bowl. If they're sneezing, and that's going to aerosolize it.
Yeah.
And then there is some virus in urine too, so I don't know if a litter box could be a source or fecal could be a source of cross-contamination.
Well,
in birds, they poop out virus, so that's how they spread it.
I shouldn't have laughed. And just I'm such a third grader. I said poop out virus. But in terms of the virus itself, how long can it live in the air?
The virus is not long-lived in the air, probably inactivated within hours.
Okay.
Sometimes secretions, though, can protect virus. So if it's in a glob of mucus, it might last longer.
And so in terms of like wild birds to cats, pooping out virus, that's how they come into contact with it, for the most part.
Yes. Or they eat a dead bird that they have.
Eating a dead bird, exactly. But I want to know, why are cats shedding it in a way that is scary, I guess, to people who love them?
Yeah, they're just a species that are more susceptible to influenzas. It's happened before. There was a big outbreak in New York City in an animal shelter that was traced back to a live market somehow with some avian influenza.
Bird flu.
Yeah, a different bird flu, but it was a less pathogenic one, but it spread to hundreds of cats in an animal shelter and made them sick, and they had to lock it down to get through it. And so it's a thing like ferrets are used in research for influenza because they're so susceptible to influenza.
Oh, one question I wanted to ask you was, first of all, what are the signs? If your cat is starting to present with something, what would it look like?
So it can be a range. So one might be just a routine upper respiratory infection. And we probably wouldn't take that very seriously most of the time because that's really common. Or it could show up as very strange neurologic signs. So they can act blind, stagger around, have seizures, become paralyzed. That's dramatic, and we don't expect to see that commonly. So I think with the respiratory signs, we have to kind of be aware, but not panic. With the neurologic signs, we kind of should panic and think of rabies.
I mean, does it progress really quickly?
Yes, very quickly within days. The incubation period for influenza is a few days, less than a week. So from the time they're exposed and infected to the time they're showing clinical signs was less than a week. And the cats that died, it was within a few days.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Really? So one of the signs I guess people could be looking for is if it's an upper respiratory, it advances really quickly.
Right.
For example, your cat starts by just having a little sneezing. Then what happens?
I think you should see your veterinarian. And
at the sniffles?
if the cat is symptomatic enough that it is decreasing its eating, it's getting dehydrated, it's getting ulcers in its mouth, like it clinically feels sick, I would see a veterinarian to get it evaluated. They may need medication to get past that.
Right. And
But usually it resolves on its own.
When you say it presents like is it like green snot? Is it,
Usually it would be mild, so some runny eyes. It can be sneezing. We don't usually see coughing with it, but it can occur. Nasal discharge, it might be clear, it might be cloudy. With some of the viruses that cause upper respiratory infection, it causes ulcers in the mouth that are painful and don't want to eat.
Right.
But it can be a mix and match of all of those signs. I mean, really think about what it's like when you have the flu. One good thing about influenza is it has a very short period of time of incubation and shedding. So if we can nurse cats through a couple of weeks of being sick, they'll probably be okay and be immune to infection thereafter.
Right.
So it is something that we would definitely encourage people to try to treat if their cat is treatable, and give it enough time for the cat to recover. And also, because right now we're seeing the most severe cases, because it's really early and recognition of the syndrome, we're seeing the very flamboyant, deadly cases. We're not seeing the housemates of those cats that maybe got mildly ill or not ill at all, but still got infected. So I suspect as there's more surveillance done, we will have a better picture of the whole spectrum of signs that cats can have and a better sense of the mortality rate.
Now, we know that if you live where your cats are outside and have exposure to wild birds, basically, that the one thing you can do is keep your cats inside at this point, right?
Certainly keeping a cat inside is going to reduce the risk as long as it's being fed a proper diet. And that person who is in the household isn't exposed and getting, infected to bringing it in through a human infection.
Right.
That would be the safest. I think it's easier said than done to take a cat with an indoor-outdoor lifestyle and so you confine it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And a lot of people like having indoor-outdoor cats, and we don't want a litter box and things like that. So I think what we should do, if it's easy to keep the cat indoors, do so. If it's not, let's make the outdoors safe for them. So something like a catio or a fence with roller bars on the top. Make sure that your outdoor poultry is separated from the cats. Don't let dead birds play in the yard. Don't let the cats go by bodies of water, because that's where a lot of the wild geese and ducks are. And that bodies of water is where there can be interface between cats and the species.
That's great. Yeah.
And really just try to mitigate exposure to the risks of diet, people, and wildlife.
I think it's so great the way you just said that too, is that it's so much easier said than done, especially when you just said a couple of years.
Yeah.
It was a matter of like a couple of weeks.
Thing. Yeah.
It's not a short thing. So that is really important.
The other thing is that USDA website has a map of every case that's been diagnosed in the U.S., and you can look at regionally where the bird flu activity is. It's heavy here in the West.
Right.
I'm sitting here in Riverside today.
Yes.
I normally live in Florida. We don't have much in Florida except in the marine mammals. So the Southeast right now is kind of safe. So it's important, I think, when we're making recommendations to look at where the hotspots are and be really careful in those areas. Take extra steps to be safe in those areas. But also remember that the epidemiology lags a little bit. The information we get is going to be at least a few weeks old before it's published, because there's a confirmation process. So keep an eye on that map and act responsibly when you're in a high-risk area.
Yeah. So just to sum that up, and again, I thought it was just great, because telling our cats who are used to being indoor-outdoor, nope, we know it's going to open up a whole can of worms inside the house and a whole lot of problems that could occur that didn't before. So again, if your cat is totally cool being in and out, they don't really care, bring them in. If they are so used to that outdoor lifestyle, then work on the environment that they go into. The roller bar fences, so that they are restricted to your yard, where you can control their exposure to these animals. And catio is always a great idea. The second big way that we can protect our cat, what do we want to call them? Our cats, our family cats, is diet. That we know for sure at this point. So can you give me your bottom line in terms of what you should be avoiding feeding your cat right now?
I think today in February 2025 is we should avoid foods that might be at risk for having live virus. Remember when the dairies were first infected, the public health officials just went into grocery stores and they bought cheese and milk and things. And 20% of the products had traces of bird flu in it already at the very beginning of the recognition, but it was inactive because it was pasteurized. And so we know that it's like widespread in our food supply now. So that means we have to avoid increasing the risk by using products that have not inactivated the virus. So as of now, we cannot say that raw foods, freeze-dried foods, or pressure pasteurized foods, or raw milk, primarily focusing on dairy and poultry at this time, doesn't seem to have a safety net to make sure it's safe. There's at least 3 companies now that are implicated in transmitting virus to cats that killed the cats through these diets. It doesn't mean that processes couldn't be improved and maybe those products could be made safe and we could have confidence buying them. But on this day, we should be really worried about feeding those products.
Okay. We're trying to avoid raw cat food, freeze-dried, high-pressure, pasteurized, and raw milk. Like there's the whole goat milk thing. It's going to be a big shift for a lot of folks, but it feels like there is no wiggle in this one. We know how this is
I think the wiggle might be dairy products and poultry is a hard no for me right now. Beef, maybe alternative proteins might be safer. I think we just don't know.
But what about, I mean, any bird though, like turkey, quail?
Yeah, all of
any.
the poultry. Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's talk about all our friends who do trapping, who do TNR, and what everyone seems to be pretty worried about at this point, including you. And you do a ton of work around TNR. Let's talk about those who are feeding and maintaining colonies and all the great people out there who are doing trapping. What can they do?
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about that because we know that those are the cats that are out there exposed to wild species, especially birds, and are at a higher risk of exposure. They're outside. And so for folks that are already just maintaining cats, it might be a whole colony, might be a few cats that are on a feeding route or in their backyard, is one of the most important things they can do is feed in a way that does not attract other species to come. And we see this all the time where people overfeed and then the raccoons and possums come or the birds come because they're eating the kibble too. That's a really high risk procedure right now. So we need to upgrade feeding so that the cats get just enough food to eat and then it's all gone, or pick it up after the cats are done eating and not leave it there to attract all this wildlife to come together and spread it to each other or spread it to the cats.
So that just means putting out a trough of food because then everyone's eating from the same dish, right?
Or you see people that are dumping like food on the sidewalk or in the parking lot or in woods. It's just a pile of food and the cats are going to get what they want and then the other creature's going to come in.
So that speaks to the act of maintaining a colony, which is, you want to know if your cats are eating in your colony anyway, but.
And then with that is to be really hypervigilant about looking at the health of the colony and then noticing if someone's off. So some of the cats that were either on dairies as colony cats or others, like people noticed this cat got neurologic signs. And one of them was a neighborhood cat that the whole neighborhood knew about. And he started to stagger. And several households had noticed that he was not stable anymore. And so they thought maybe he had rabies. He was trapped for that, but they tested for bird flu first. He had bird flu, not rabies.
Wow. What's the best way for folks to stay totally on top of what's going on? Is it checking in with the CDC reports? Is it the USDA? Where, if you had a one-stop shop in order to know what's the latest and greatest here?
2 different things. One is the shelter medicine programs across the country have gotten together to create a document that we try to keep up to date. We have a link. It's a shared Google document so that we can add to it quickly as we learn more. And so we're constantly updating it with a number of cases, good sources of information, and recommendations for shelters, rescues, community cat programs, and pet owners. So that's the best source that the veterinarians are producing. Also, that USDA map is a really good way. It's the one place where you're going to see accurate information that is correct being posted. And there's even a link to that in that shelter medicine document.
There's also the blog, Worms and Germs. Is that you would send folks there to get the latest and greatest here?
That's where I go often for the latest and
Really?
greatest information. Dr. Scott Weese is a veterinarian in an academic institution in Canada. And so he's keeping very close track, and he's really good at distilling scientific information into understandable chunks for both veterinarians and for the public. So I check in on his blog a couple times a week.
Okay, great. Julie, thank you. There's so much information here. We'll try to pack it all in there for you guys and allow you to sort out fact from fiction and have you be prepared so that you can take care of the cats you love, whether they're in your homes or in your community. They all deserve our love. And thank you, Julie, for all your help and everything you do.
Thank you, Jackson. It's always a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Whew, right? That's a lot of information, but hopefully Dr. Levy just dropped some knowledge on everybody and we're feeling a little bit empowered. Just a little bit more than we did before. A little bit more like, all right, I got what it takes to just be basically prepared for what's coming right now. And that means changes. Now, let's be honest. I mean, I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go where the evidence is right now. I'm going to move towards the recommendations based on that evidence. I am a huge proponent of raw food. You guys know I am. I'm probably going to make a change right now because I don't want to take risks knowing that the flu virus can live within raw food, freeze-dried, or high-pressure pasteurized food. Now, I know I'm going to get blowback on this, and that's fine. Give me your information, and I encourage any raw food companies to let me know what you think. I love you guys, and I hate saying this, but this is where we got to go right now based on what we know. The other thing that Dr. Levy said really well, I thought, look, if you got a cat who's indoor-outdoor and they don't mind going indoor for a while, let's please do that because that's the best way to keep them safe. If they are going to go bananas and take you all down with them, then if they're going indoor-outdoor, we at least try to control the environment. If you have a catio like this, fantastic. Otherwise, we have to control the outside environment. Keep them in your yard if you possibly can because you can look and see, is there standing water, shared food source, any extra exposure to wild birds that we just don't want them to have? That's what we do. And she also covered some great information about TNR and all our friends out there who are doing trapping and caretaking of our community cats. First of all, thank you guys so much for all your help. But there's great information, and that information got a lot deeper. So I'm just going to tell you that I'm going to put out a different video at some point with some more in-depth about TNR, because I thought it was great info. And Dr. Levy's sweet spot is TNR, if you didn't know that. In the meantime, let me just remind you one more time, it is a rapidly evolving situation. What we know right now, February 2025, can be completely different in April 2025. That's why we gave you the links that are in the description to help keep you as up to the minute as you possibly can. Why? Because we got to do everything we can. We got to adapt our way of living with our cats so that we can keep our cats as safe as possible, whether they're in our homes, whether they're out in our community. They deserve a shot against this nasty bug. All right, y'all, until next time, thank you again for supporting this channel. Subscribe if you haven't, leave a comment if you hadn't, because we're a community, and this is how we're going to stay on top of it. Light, love, mojo to you. Meow.